The desperate Plath signal arrived at 03 for 7 hours. Tehran Standard Time, Deep Space Monitoring Station, Omega-7, had been tracking cosmic background radiation for 3 years without incident. Then the universe screamed, "Communications officer." Sarah Chen nearly dropped her coffee when the computers began translating the alien transmission. The automated systems had been designed to detect patterns in radio waves, not desperate pleas for survival. But there it was, clear as daylight, cutting through the static of deep space like a knife through silk. "Please, anyone who can hear this message, we are the Kithara of the Andorian spiral. Our worlds burn, our children die. The Void Hunters have come, and we cannot stop them. If there are any civilizations capable of war, we beg you to help us. Time grows short." Chun's hands trembled as she reached for the emergency communication array. Within minutes, the transmission was bouncing between Earth's military command centers, from lunar base to the orbital defense platforms circling Mars. The message repeated every 37 minutes, each iteration weaker than the last, as if the transmitter itself was dying. Admiral Rebecca Torres stood in the war room beneath the Rocky Mountains, staring at the holographic display showing the alien transmission's point of origin. The Andorian spiral lay 43 light-years from Earth, in a region of space that had been marked as potentially habitable but unexplored. Now it was asking for help. "What do we know about these she asked the assembled officers. Dr. Elena Busquets, Earth's leading xenobiologist and military strategist, stepped forward. She had spent her career preparing for this moment, though she had always imagined first contact would be more diplomatic. Based on the transmission's linguistic patterns and technological signatures, they appeared to be a peaceful species, advanced enough for interstellar communication, but the desperation in their message suggests they're not warriors. Captain Marcus Stone, a veteran of the Martian Independence War and the asteroid belt conflicts, studied the tactical display with cold eyes. He had seen too many battles, lost too many friends to approaching conflicts with naive optimism, and these Void Hunters they mentioned? Unknown, Vasquez admitted. But if they're causing this level of devastation to an entire spiral arm, they're not raiders or pirates. This sounds like systematic extermination. The room fell silent. Everyone present had grown up with stories of humanity's own dark history. The wars that had nearly destroyed Earth before the species finally learned to work together. The idea of facing an enemy that specialized in genocide struck a nerve that ran deep in the human psyche. Admiral Torres made the decision that would change the galaxy forever. We respond. The meeting that followed lasted 18 hours. Politicians argued about resources and risks. Scientists debated the implications of revealing Earth's location to potentially hostile aliens. Military leaders calculated odds and strategic possibilities, but in the end, the decision had already been made. Humanity had clawed its way up from the ashes of its own near extinction. They would not stand by and watch another species face the same fate. The fleet that departed Earth 3 weeks later was unlike anything humanity had ever assembled. The flagship, Relentless, a kilometer-long dreadnought bristling with kinetic weapons and plasma cannons. The assault carriers, Valkyrie and Thunderbolt, each carrying 2 full Marine battalions. The stealth destroyers, Shadow and Phantom, designed for reconnaissance and surgical strikes. And supporting them all, the supply ships and medical vessels that would keep the fleet operational 43 light-years from home. Captain Stone commanded the ground forces aboard the Relentless, while Dr. Vasquez served as both scientific advisor and strategic consultant. They had worked together before, during the suppression of the Europa mining rebellion, and had developed a professional respect that bordered on friendship as the fleet entered hyperspace. Stone found Vasquez in her laboratory, studying what little data they had managed to gather about their destination. "Any new insights?" he asked. She looked up from her displays, exhaustion evident in her dark eyes. "The transmissions stopped 2 days ago. Either they've been completely destroyed, or they've gone into hiding." She paused, manipulating the holographic star map with her fingers. "Marcus, what if we're too late?" Stone considered the question. Seriously, he had learned long ago that false optimism got soldiers killed. "Then we make sure whoever did this knows that attacking innocent people has consequences." The journey took 6 weeks at maximum hyperspace velocity. During that time, the fleet's 3,000 personnel trained relentlessly. Marine units practiced, boarding actions in the ship's combat simulators. Pilots flew endless patrol missions around the fleet's perimeter. Engineers worked around the clock to ensure every system was operating at peak efficiency. As they approached the Andorian spiral, long-range sensors began painting a picture of devastation that exceeded their worst fears. Entire worlds had been stripped of their atmospheres. Space debris fields marked the locations of what had once been thriving colonies. The Kythera's civilization, which had taken millennia to build, had been erased in a matter of months. But they found survivors. The first contact occurred on the outer edge of the Kythera home system. A small ship, barely spaceworthy, limped toward. The human fleet broadcasting identification codes and pleas for rescue. When the Relentless brought the vessel aboard, the beings that emerged were unlike anything in Earth's xenological databases. The Kythera were tall and slender, with pale blue skin that seemed to shimmer in the ship's lights. Their large eyes held an intelligence that was unmistakably advanced, but also a weariness that spoke of unspeakable horrors witnessed. The leader of the group, who identified himself as Ambassador Thalkarin, collapsed to his knees when he saw the human officers. "You came," he whispered. Through the translation device Dr. Vasquez had hastily calibrated. We believed no one would hear us." Captain Stone helped the alien to his feet, noting how the creature's limbs trembled with malnutrition. "An exhaustion. We heard you, Ambassador. Tell us what happened here." What followed was a briefing that chilled even the most hardened veterans in the fleet. The Void Hunters were not a single species, but a confederation of aggressive races united by their hunger for conquest and destruction. They moved through space in massive biomechanical ships, stripping worlds of resources and enslaving or consuming their populations. They had been expanding their territory for centuries, leaving empty systems in their wake. "They took our children first," Thalkarin explained, his voice breaking. "Said young minds were easier to ... convert. They use neural implants to turn captured beings into extensions of their collective consciousness. My own daughter," he could not continue. Dr. Vasquez leaned forward, her scientific mind processing the tactical implications. "How many ships do they have? What kind of weapons? Hundreds of vessels, maybe thousands. Their motherships are the size of small moons, grown rather than built. They use weapons that tear matter apart at the molecular level, and their fighters can phase in and out of normal space." The ambassador's description painted a picture of an enemy that was both technologically advanced and utterly ruthless. Stone exchanged glances with Admiral Torres, who had joined them for the briefing via hologram. The human fleet was powerful by Earth's standards, but they were facing an enemy that had conquered entire sectors of the galaxy. "Where are they now?" Stone asked. THEL Corin manipulated a control on his suit, projecting a tactical display that showed the locations of Void Hunter fleets throughout the spiral arm. They established a staging area in the Zarian Nebula, approximately 2 light-years from here. From there, they launched raids on the remaining inhabited systems. The human officers studied the display with professional interest. The nebula would provide excellent cover for a large fleet, but it would also limit their mobility and sensor range. If approached correctly, it could become a trap rather than a sanctuary. "How many of your people survived?" Admiral Torres asked. "Perhaps 50,000, scattered across a dozen hidden colonies. We dare not use long-range communications for fear of detection." Delcorin looked at each human officer in turn. "We can provide you with detailed intelligence about Void Hunter tactics and technology, but we cannot fight alongside you. Our people are not warriors." Stone nodded, understanding. "We didn't come here expecting you to fight. We came here to end this." The ambassador's eyes widened. "You would attack them directly. The Void Hunters have destroyed civilizations far more advanced than—" He stopped, realizing how his words might sound. "More advanced than us?" Stone smiled grimly. "Ambassador, there's something you need to understand about humans. We've spent our entire evolutionary history learning to kill things that were bigger, stronger, and better adapted than we were. It's what we do." Over the following days, the human fleet established a temporary base in an asteroid field on the edge of the system. Marine units transferred to the Cathora refugee ships to provide protection and medical aid. Engineers began analyzing captured Void Hunter technology that the aliens had managed to salvage from attacks. And intelligence officers worked with Cathora survivors to build a comprehensive picture of their enemy. Dr. Vasquez found herself fascinated by the biological aspects of Void Hunter technology. Their ships were not constructed but grown using a combination of organic neural networks and quantum crystalline matrices that she was only beginning to understand. The implications were staggering. "They're not just using biotechnology," she explained to Stone during one of their evening briefings. "They've found a way to merge biological consciousness with quantum computational systems. Their ships are literally alive, with distributed intelligence networks that can adapt and evolve in real time." Stone processed this information with the practical mindset of a soldier. "So conventional electronic warfare won't work against them." "Exactly. But it also means they might be vulnerable to biological agents or neural disruption weapons." Vasquez pulled up a schematic of a captured Void Hunter fighter. "Look at these neural pathway clusters. If we could introduce a virus or toxin that targets their organic components, we'd be committing genocide," Stone finished quietly. They stared at each other across the laboratory table. Both had sworn oaths to protect human life and defend Earth against all enemies. But they had also seen the recordings from Kithara worlds, the massive slave camps and breeding facilities where entire populations had been processed like livestock. "Sometimes," Vasquez said finally, "genocide is the only way to stop genocide." The final piece of intelligence came from an unexpected source. Long-range sensors detected a Void Hunter scout ship approaching the system's outer edge, moving with the arrogant confidence of a predator that had never encountered serious resistance. Stone made the decision to capture it. The operation was swift and surgical. 2 stealth destroyers bracketed the alien vessel while it was investigating the remains of a Kithara mining station. Electromagnetic pulse weapons disabled its systems before it could transmit a warning, and boarding parties secured the ship within minutes. The creatures they found inside were unlike anything in human experience. The Void Hunters were roughly humanoid but twice the size of a normal human, with cybernetic implants covering much of their bodies. Their nervous systems had been so extensively modified that it was difficult to determine where biology ended and technology began. But they were still alive, and they could still feel pain. The interrogation that followed violated several interstellar treaties that Earth had signed. But those treaties had been written for a galaxy where civilized beings negotiated their differences rather than enslaving entire species. Stone personally oversaw the process. His conscience weighted against the knowledge that millions of lives hung in the balance. What they learned changed everything. The Void Hunters were not the ultimate enemy. They were servants of something far worse, an ancient intelligence that existed in the quantum foam between dimensions. The being called itself the Harvester, and it had been consuming civilizations for millions of years, using races like the Void Hunters as its tools. Earth's interference in the Andorian spiral had been detected, and a massive fleet was already being dispatched to investigate this new threat. "How long do we have?" Stone asked the captured Void Hunter commander, its voice filtered through a translation matrix. "Your world burns within the year," it replied with something that might have been satisfaction. "The Harvester hungers for new species to add to its collection. Humans will make excellent servants once your individuality has been removed." Stone looked at the creature for a long moment, then turned to the Marine guards. "Space it." As the airlocks cycled and the Void Hunter was ejected into the vacuum, Stone felt something fundamental shift in his worldview. Earth was no longer just responding to a distant plea for help. They were fighting for their own survival, and the rules of civilized warfare no longer applied. The fleet began preparing for the assault on the Zarian Nebula, but now their mission had expanded beyond simple rescue. They were going to send a message to the Harvester and its servants. A message written in plasma fire and kinetic destruction. Humanity had tried to be the galaxy's protectors. Now they would become its apex predators. Asterisk, when predators meet their match. The Zarian Nebula stretched across 3 light-years of space, its swirling gases and electromagnetic storms providing perfect cover for the largest Void Hunter fleet ever assembled. Long-range sensors counted over 200 vessels, from small fighters to massive bioships, the size of asteroids. At the center of the formation, nearly invisible against the nebula's backdrop, lurked the Harvester's regional command ship, Captain. Stone stood on the bridge of the Relentless, studying the tactical display with the focused intensity of a predator selecting its prey. 3 weeks of preparation had transformed the human fleet from a rescue mission into something far more dangerous. Every ship had been modified with weapons and systems, reverse-engineered from captured Void Hunter technology. Every Marine had been equipped with neural shielding designed to resist the enemy's mind control devices. "Final systems check complete," reported Commander Hayes from the tactical station. "All ships report ready for combat operations." Admiral Torres appeared on the main hologram projector, broadcasting from her flagship in Earth orbit. "Marcus, you have complete operational authority. Make them regret ever learning about humanity." Stone nodded grimly. "Understood, Admiral. Beginning Operation Apex." The assault began with a coordinated electronic warfare attack that would have crippled any conventional fleet. Human ships launched thousands of cyber warfare drones into the nebula, targeting the quantum biological networks that linked the Void Hunter vessels. But as Dr. Vasquez had predicted, the enemy's organic technology adapted quickly. developing countermeasures within minutes. What the Void Hunters couldn't adapt to was human unpredictability, while they were focused on the cyber attack. Stealth. Destroyers Shadow and Phantom had positioned themselves within the nebula using a navigation technique that no sane pilot would attempt. They had literally ridden the gravitational waves created by the nebula's internal electromagnetic storms, using the natural chaos to mask their approach. The first indication the Void Hunters had of their presence was when antimatter torpedoes began detonating inside their formation. All units execute Plan Berserker, Stone commanded over the fleet communication network. The Relentless and its escort vessels burst from hyperspace at the nebula's edge and immediately began broadcasting on all frequencies. But instead of demands for surrender or threats of destruction, they transmitted something far more disturbing: human music. Specifically, they played Wagner's Ride of the Valkyries at volumes that could be heard across light years. The psychological effect on the Void Hunters was immediate and devastating. As a hive mind species, they had never encountered a race that deliberately used chaos and noise as weapons. The musical bombardment disrupted their neural networks and made coordinated responses nearly impossible. Delcarin, observing from the Relentless command center, watched in fascination as human tactical doctrine unfolded. "Your people fight like they're insane," he commented to Dr. Vasquez. "That's the point," she replied, monitoring the biological effects of their sonic weapons on captured Void Hunter neural tissue. Sanity is predictable. Insanity is adaptable. The first wave of Void Hunter fighters launched from their bioships with the disciplined precision of a military force that had conquered hundreds of worlds. They moved in perfect formation, their phase-shifting technology allowing them to appear and disappear at will. Against any conventional enemy, they would have achieved complete tactical superiority within minutes. But human pilots had been training for this exact scenario. Lieutenant Sarah Wildcard Rodriguez rolled her fighter into an impossible spiral, chasing a Void Hunter through a series of phase shifts that should have left her flying blind. Instead, she had learned to predict their patterns by watching the gravitational distortions they created. When the enemy fighter materialized to attack what it thought was empty space, Rodriguez was waiting with a full spread of quantum missiles. Splash 1. She reported over the tactical network. "These things are fast, but they're not creative." Across the battle zone, similar scenes played out as human pilots demonstrated why their species had dominated aerial warfare on Earth for over a century. They didn't just fight in 3 dimensions. They fought in 4, using time and probability as weapons. Void Hunter fighters found themselves outmaneuvered by pilots who treated physics as suggestions rather than laws. But the real shock came when the Void Hunter bioships began their assault. The largest of these vessels was over 10 kilometers long, a living nightmare of organic armor and quantum weaponry. It moved through space like a predator stalking prey, its hull pulsing with bioluminescent patterns that induced fear in most sentient species. Molecular disruptor beams lanced out from its weapon clusters, tearing apart asteroids and smaller ships at the subatomic level. The Relentless met it head-on in a display of tactical insanity that would be studied in military academies for centuries. "All power to forward shields," Stone commanded. Ramming speed, the human dreadnought accelerated directly toward the bioship, its engines pushed far beyond safe operational limits. Void Hunter weapons tore chunks from its armor, but the ship's reinforced hull held together long enough to achieve weapons range. "Fire everything," Stone ordered. The Relentless unleashed its entire arsenal in a single coordinated barrage. Kinetic penetrators punched through organic armor, plasma cannons burned through neural clusters, and at the moment of closest approach, the ship's experimental weapon system activated. Dr. Vasquez had spent weeks developing what she called a neural virus, a quantum biological weapon that could infect the Void Hunters' living ships. The delivery system was brilliantly simple. They would ram a data probe directly into the enemy vessel's neural cortex and upload the virus through direct contact. The probe, fired from point-blank range, penetrated the bioship's hull and injected its payload directly into the creature's brainstem. The effect was immediate and catastrophic. The massive vessel began convulsing, its weapon systems firing randomly as the virus corrupted its neural pathways. Within minutes, the ship was tearing itself apart from the inside, but the victory came at a cost. The Relentless had taken severe damage during the attack run, and radiation from the dying bioship was poisoning its crew. Stone ordered an immediate evacuation to the escort vessels, staying behind with a skeleton crew to ensure the ship's weapons remained operational. As the human fleet regrouped, long-range sensors detected something that changed the entire nature of the battle. A massive quantum distortion was forming at the nebula's center, and emerging from it was a ship that dwarfed everything else in the system. The Harvester's command vessel was not built or grown, but evolved, a living embodiment of entropy and consumption that had existed since before Earth's sun was born. Its hull was composed of crystallized dark matter, and its weapons drew power directly from the quantum vacuum. When it spoke, its voice resonated through dimensions that human science barely understood. Interesting, the ancient intelligence commented. Its words translated by systems that shouldn't have been able to process concepts so alien. A species that fights with controlled madness. You will make excellent additions to my collection. The command ship's weapon systems began to activate, tearing holes in space-time itself. Several human vessels simply ceased to exist, their matter scattered across parallel dimensions. It became clear that conventional weapons would be useless against an enemy that could manipulate the fundamental structure of reality. But humans had one advantage that the Harvester hadn't counted on. They refused to accept that anything was impossible. Stone, still aboard the damaged Relentless, made a decision that would either save the fleet or destroy it. All ships, execute Plan Omega. Full quantum destabilization of the nebula's core. Dr. Vasquez understood immediately what he intended. Marcus, that will collapse the entire region into a micro-black hole. We'll all be pulled in. Not if we're moving fast enough, Stone replied. Helm, set course for the command ship. Maximum burn. The surviving human vessels formed up around the Relentless and began accelerating toward the Harvester's ship. At the same time, they deployed every quantum torpedo and singularity mine in their arsenal, creating a chain reaction that began destabilizing the nebula's gravitational field. The Harvester realized the humans' intention too late. As space-time began collapsing around its command ship, it found itself trapped by the same quantum distortions it had been using as weapons. The ancient intelligence, accustomed to consuming civilizations over millions of years, was forced to confront an enemy that measured victory in seconds. Impossible, it transmitted as the micro-black hole began forming. No species commits suicide to defeat an enemy. Stone's response was broadcast on all frequencies, ensuring that every Void Hunter in the system could hear it. We're not committing suicide. We're taking you with us. The Relentless and its escort vessels reached the edge of the collapsing region just as their hyperspace drives activated. The jump was insanely dangerous, attempting to enter hyperspace while reality itself was being torn apart. But human engineers had always specialized in making impossible things work. Behind them, the Zarian Nebula collapsed into a singularity that would burn for 10,000 years. The Harvester's command ship, along with half the Void Hunter fleet, was pulled into the event horizon and destroyed. The remaining enemy vessels, suddenly cut off from their controlling intelligence, began attacking each other in confusion. The human fleet emerged from hyperspace near the Kithara refugee colonies, battered and radiation burned, but victorious. Stone transferred command to Admiral Torres via quantum entanglement communicator, his voice barely audible through the static. Operation Apex complete. Primary target eliminated. Enemy fleet scattered. He paused, looking out at the stars where the nebula had been. Ma'am, I need to inform you that humanity is now at war with forces we don't fully understand. This was just the beginning. In the weeks that followed, word of the battle spread through the galactic community like wildfire. The Cathora survivors, finally free to rebuild their civilization, told the story to anyone who would listen. Other species that had suffered under Void Hunter attacks began reaching out to Earth, offering alliance and assistance. But the most significant change was in how the galaxy perceived humanity itself. Ambassador, now serving as the Cathora representative to Earth, put it best during his address to the Galactic Council. We begged for saviors, and Earth sent us something far more dangerous. They sent us predators who hunt other predators, the Void Hunters. Learned too late that there are worse things in the universe than extinction. There are humans. Dr. Vasquez, now promoted to head of Earth's Xenological Defense Department, spent her days analyzing the quantum biological samples recovered from the battle. Her research would eventually lead to weapons and defenses that could protect entire star systems from entities like the Harvester. But she never forgot the price of that knowledge. Captain Stone never returned to Earth. He chose to remain in the Andorian Spiral, training mixed human Cathora combat units and preparing for the next threat to emerge from the dark between stars. His ship, rebuilt with hybrid technology, became the flagship of humanity's first interstellar defense fleet. The galaxy was no longer the same place it had been before the Zarian Nebula incident. Word spread through the cosmic community about the species that had answered a desperate plea for help by declaring war on entropy itself. Trade routes began diverting toward Earth. Diplomatic missions arrived weekly, and in the darkest corners of space, things that had once hunted freely began to look over their shoulders. Humanity had entered the galactic stage not as supplicants or explorers, but as apex predators. They had proven that when pushed to the brink, humans didn't just fight back. They redefined what it meant to be dangerous. The Void Hunters had learned this lesson at the cost of their existence. Other hostile entities would soon discover that the galaxy's newest predators were always hunting, always adapting, and always ready to prove that some prey bites back harder than any predator can imagine. In the end, the Cathora had gotten exactly what they asked for: salvation. They simply hadn't realized that salvation would come wearing human faces and carrying weapons that could tear holes in reality itself. But then again, they had never specified what kind of help they wanted.